Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Development Committee, 19th of November 2020. Apologies for absence. They've been received from Councillor Iano. There are no substitute members attending, item 2. Item 3 are non-members attending. I've seen Councillor Gooding, Councillor McPherson and Councillor Steptoe. Thank you. Item 4 is meeting of the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of October 2020. Are you happy for me to sign those as a correct and accurate record?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. I see no resistance to that. Thank you. Item 5 is to receive declarations of interest. Looking around the screen. Unusually, we have none tonight. Excellent. Right. Item 6 is land to the east of the Rugby Club, Aviation Way, Rochford. And Katie, Councillor Steptoe, your hand's up.
Yes, Chairman, just to declare an interest as County Councillor for the area of both applications.
Okay, thank you. So yes, item 6. Land to the east of the Rugby Club, Aviation Way, Rochford. Katie Rogers is going to present to us on this one, please. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Sonia, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully members on you can see a location plan on screen for this application. So this application relates to a wider site which is edged blue on the plan on the screen. And this was granted outline planning permission for a business park in 2016. The wider site runs adjacent to Cherry Orchard Way to the west and abuts the Aviation Business Park to the south. This application relates to the area edged red towards the central part of the site. The site would abut part of the strategic green space along the northern boundary and along the western boundary. I'll take you to the layout plan. The application proposes 4 buildings, 2 elongated larger buildings, so one running adjacent to the western boundary, one running along the northern boundary, and then 2 smaller buildings. One here where the cursor is and another here. 2 vehicular accesses are proposed off the May and Spine Road, one on the eastern side of the site and one to the southern boundary. The buildings would have frontages facing inwards towards the centre of the site in this area here and entrances for pedestrians and vehicles to unload within the units to the front elevations. Parking will be provided to the front of each unit and cycle and refuse stores would also be provided dotted around the site. So there's one where my cursor is here, another refuse and cycle store here, and again in front of these parts here and here. So on screen now is the proposed landscaping plan. Soft landscaping will be provided in the southeastern area of the site, so where my cursor is here, with grass planting in the central area, around which trees and hedge planting would be provided. The hedging would in time shield the proposed 2.5 metre security boundary fence, which would run along where my cursor is indicating here, in this corner of the site. This boundary fence would also run around the entire perimeter of the site, so all around the edge essentially, and there would be a gated access point here across this vehicular access just north of the southern boundary. In the course of the application, more robust tree planting has been proposed, with a greater number of semi-mature trees now proposed to give a greater instant impact. In total, some 66 new trees will be provided, including some now between the parking areas. So if you can see where my cursor is indicating here, so there'll be a hedge and planting to break up this, what would otherwise be quite an expansive sort of hard surface area here. And then there's again here and here within the sort of built up area of the site. A slight amendment to the proposed conditions 2 and 4 is therefore recommended to ensure that this additional landscaping is delivered, as this is not shown on the originally provided site layout plan. The bins and cycle stores that I referred to, just pointing out in the layout, would be fenced with galvanized steel structure. So the cycle store being this sort of open area, whereas the bins would be shielded from view with this galvanized steel. If I take you to the elevation, the plan on screen shows the elevations to one of the proposed buildings, but all the others would be of the same appearance. The buildings would appear flat roofed, as a parapet wall would rise to a height of 9 meters, obscuring a shallow pitched roof beyond. The buildings would have a simple rectangular footprint, and the facing material would be corrugated metal sheeting on the elevations in a contrasting sort of dark and then a light version of that material. Glazing would use aluminium frames, and generally the glazing is to the front elevation, so that's the top elevation you can see on the screen, and the side elevations, which are on the bottom of the screen. The use of the proposed buildings for B1 and B2, and some B8 would accord with the original outline consent. A correction to the report is noted at 3.16, as the original outline allowed for a total of 1,000 square meters of B8 use, not for the figure stated. The applicant is aware of the restriction on the outline with regard to B8 use, which any reserved matters application consent such as this would have to comply with. It's suggested that an informative is added just for the interest of clarity. It is considered that this reserved matters application provides appropriate detail of landscaping, scale, appearance, layout and access, which are the matters for determination here. And in relation to the business park context, it is considered that the application is appropriate. Therefore, the recommendation is one of approval, subject to conditions 2 and 4 being amended as I've just mentioned, and also the reported conditions in the report. That's it, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a real life speaker on this one. This is for the first time. This is Miss Kelly McCann, who's the agent, who has 5 minutes to speak to us, and we'll give you a reminder at 4. So over to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good evening, members. I'm a senior planner at Knight Frank, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the applicant, Henry Boot Developments. As Katie has provided a very comprehensive overview of the proposed development, I'll just highlight a few key points. The scheme presented this evening has been informed through discussions with officers at Rochford District Council and is recommended for approval. The application constitutes another phase in the delivery of the overall master plan for Airport Business Park Southend. Outline planning permission, as approved in October 2016, established the principle of comprehensively redeveloping the site to deliver a new business park with a range of uses, including B1, B2 and B8 uses. The outline planning permission reflects the allocation of the site for future redevelopment within the London Southend Airport and Environs Joint Area Action Plan. This application follows previous reserved matters permissions for the IPECO unit, Spine Road and Costa drive-through. Beyond the outline planning permission and joint area action plan, the provision of employment floor space and B1, B2 and B8 uses specifically is strongly encouraged by court strategy policies ED1 and DM32. The proposed development will provide a series of flexible industrial units encompassing 6,467 square metres GIA that can be operated under use classes B1, B2 or B8. The units can be easily and readily subdivided or amalgamated to respond to market demand. This means that the units can be operated flexibly and as per the final operator's requirements. When completed, it's estimated that the proposed development will create an additional 137 to 180 full-time jobs, depending on the breakdown of B1, B2 and B8 floor areas. It should be noted that there have been no comparable schemes in terms of quantity or quality of floor space within the local area over recent years. We're providing a much needed development with associated benefits in terms of employment and business development. The buildings have been designed to accord with the indicative design principles and parameters approved under the outline permission. The units will be of a high quality specification, similar to other speculative industrial schemes that are being developed by Henry Boot across the country. The buildings have been designed so that they complement surrounding built form, including the IPECO unit to the south of the site and South End's launchpad scheme to the northwest. The elevations are of a contemporary aesthetic with simple and clean material palette, including light and dark grey metal cladding with glazing to the front. Coloured canopies and signage are to be installed at the entrance point to each unit, which will break up the massing of each terrace and improve legibility. The landscape design is in accordance with the approved design code, which aimed at creating a strong landscape corridor along the spine road. We have sought to add as much soft landscaping as possible into the scheme. The proposed development includes 75 car parking spaces, including 15 accessible spaces and 54 cycle parking spaces. This accords with maximum car parking standards set out within Essex County Council's Parking Standards SPD. In summary, the proposed development is supported by virtue of the outline planning permission, allocation within the Joint Area Action Plan, and by planning policy, which encourages the development of new employment spaces. For the reasons I have explained, I kindly ask that this application be approved.
Thank you very much. Do any of our non-members wish to speak on this one? Okay, thank you. I'll start with Councillor Eaves, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things to question on this one. The refuse areas, they're obviously designed for wheelie bins. What happens in the case of a company that goes in there that has to operate using normal size skips? I can see this being a bit of a problem. If I could have an answer on that one, please. I'm not sure if there are conditions that limit that to just the use of the area where the wheelie bins are designed to go. The other thing is,
we'll gather up questions in one hit at the end.
Yep.
Councillor
Okay.
Wilson, please.
Sorry, there was one more, please, Chair.
All right.
One more point. In light of the announcement from central government at the beginning of this week about petrol and diesel cars being basically not allowed to be sold by 2030, do we have any condition that we can put on for electric charging points for cars? Because I can see that this is going to become an issue. Thank you. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Well, thank you, Chairman. My point, I welcome the landscaping and the planting, but my question about 3.53 and 3.54, are those species that are proposed to be planted, are they native Essex varieties? And if they're not, is there any way that we could have suitable native Essex species planted? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor FD.
I'm not going to take up too much time. Basically, the same point that Councillor Eaves made about the electric charging points. Seems a very short-sighted that there's none on this development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to gather the questions together, please, Katie?
Yep, fine. Taking them in order, I think. So in terms of skips, so if I just go back to sharing the screen. And bring up the site plan. So hopefully you can see the site plan on the screen. So actually it might be better to show, oh, no, it's fine. So this area here is proposed for the bin storage, and that clearly is not going to accommodate a skip. So if there is a requirement for skips to be used, if it's a temporary thing, then that could probably be accommodated without too much of a problem in this kind of in the area in front of the building, if it's very temporary. If any of the potential future users require skips to deal with waste in the future, it might mean the need to revise the layout in front of buildings, and that would be an application that would have to likely come before members to consider if they need to site a skip sort of permanently in an area to deal with their waste. But as it stands at the moment, the application is proposing the service yard, the parking area in this darker shading here, and then refuse by way of bins in these enclosed galvanised steel structures. In terms of the petrol and diesel cars and the need in the future for more electric vehicle charging points, it's a good point, and we are going to sort of insist on the provision for electric vehicle charging points and the infrastructure to provide those in future on applications sort of going forward. But in this application, we're solely talking about a reserve matters application. So we are limited in what we can take into account in the determination of this application. And those matters relate to landscaping, scale, appearance, layout and access. So the point at which we could insist on as a council the provision of certain infrastructures relating to electric vehicle charging points is on an outline application or a full application. So on this application for reserve matters, it wouldn't be possible or appropriate for us to put those conditions, any conditions on in relation to that. It doesn't obviously mean that the developer couldn't of their own accord provide some of that infrastructure on the site. In relation to the species, if you bear with me, so I've looked this up myself. So the trees that are proposed are a mix of field maple, Italian alder, not Essex native, I would have thought, hornbeam, crabapple, Scots pine, cherry, and an ornamental pear. So they've got a variety of species across the site. They're not all Essex native, but there is no sort of policy requirement for them to be such. So I don't think it would be appropriate for us to insist on that by way of condition, but we can certainly raise it as an informative for the applicant to consider. I think that would be the appropriate way of dealing with that.
Thank you.
And I think
That
was all
it
of
for the
them.
moment. We'll go to Councillor Hookway next.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. Katie, with regard to the site layout, I wonder if you could bring that up again. Thank you. Now, from what you were saying earlier, you said that there was going to be a gated entrance to the south entrance. But there's 2 access points onto the site. So is there any reason why it would be gated only at one entrance, or is it meant to be gated at both entrances?
I believe the plan shows gating on both entrances. Mute Katie.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, to confirm, there's a gated entrance to both. So on the eastern boundary, the gates are inset away from the junction Bellmouth. So if you can see my cursor, the manual gateway is approximately here. And then if I just scroll around, there is another here. So that's the gated entrance to the access that's opposite part of the southern boundary.
Okay.
Chairman, could I just quick follow up on that? Are they meant to be manned security gates, or is that not part of the plan?
So I guess they are for security purposes. Whether they'll be manned or there'll be some sort of other control on them, I don't know. But in terms of a feature, a kind of gated entrance feature, there's no concern about the from an aesthetic point of view, the gates being there and they're set an appropriate distance away from the Belmouth junction.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't privy to the start of this, as I got disconnected somehow. There isn't. I didn't understand. Are these units? What are these units for? The purpose of, first of all, and I noticed that just off cuff, there is no vehicles are allowed on site. Then is that correct?
Should I take that as a question?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So the units, all of them are proposed for a combination, I suppose, of B1, so offices, and B2, general industrial, and B8, storage and warehousing uses. And the applicant hasn't been prescriptive in the floor space that would relate to each building. So what it would provide is flexibility for any future users. But the use for all of the buildings for B1 would accord with the outline planning consent, because the intention was for this business park to provide quite a lot of B1 office accommodation. That was kind of its intention originally. The outline also allowed for a certain amount of floor space to be provided for B2, general industrial. And although there have been a number of reserve matters applications on other parcels of the site, they haven't reached the limit of the limit that was imposed on the outline application in terms of the amount of B2 they could provide. So essentially, all of this floor space could all be B2, general industrial. And they are also asking for an element of it to be B8, so storage and warehousing. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if you heard this part, but there was a limitation on the outline consent that B8 use across the site as a whole could not exceed 1,000 square meters. And obviously, if all of this floor space were put to B8, that would exceed that limit. But the applicant is aware of the need for them to comply with the conditions on the original outline. So it would be a mix of B1, B2, and maybe some B8 on the site.
And the answer to my second question?
And in terms of the parking, clearly there are gates proposed. They would be opened, presumably, at times to let vehicles in. The site might be closed as a whole, at a certain point in the evening, and then opened again at a certain point in the morning. But it would obviously be available for people visiting the site to go in and kind of park at suitable times.
Where would they park? Could you tell me where they park? And also, as you said, that for office use and some light industrial. So where would disabled parkers be able to park? Should they? Obviously, they can work just the same as we can. So could you describe to me where they would park, please?
Yeah. So on this layout, what I'm going to do is just zoom into a certain section, but all of the parking is in this sort of pavia, darker shading where my cursor is here. So they're the parking spaces, and the white is the service yard. So that's obviously the entrance into these parking bays. And the larger ones are the disabled bays.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Stanley, before we move on, you said you missed part of the presentation. Could you just elaborate on that, please, and try and give me a time scale, because that may affect your ability to vote in this on this application or not?
Well, I didn't get what the first part was about.
Right. Okay.
About five, 6 minutes.
Right. Councillor Stanley, the advice is going to be that you're not able to vote on this matter, I'm afraid. I need to move on, though, with other members that have indicated.
It's not my fault, is it?
Councillor FD. Sorry, you've already had one go, Councillor FD. I'll come to Councillor Shaw first. Mrs. Shaw.
One for Katie. Katie, are we happy with the site only having the minimum width of vehicles? Because as vehicles are getting larger, they've only gone to the minimum parking bay dimension, 2.5 width and 5.5. Sorry, 5.5 meters length, as opposed to the preferred 2.9 meters by 5.5. Is that going to be acceptable for the cars that are on the road today, please?
We'll gather up all questions in one.
Thank
hit
you,
again.
Chairman.
Councillor Eaves, you had a second question, second go.
Thank you, Chair. My question is a follow-on really from the answer that Katie gave us on the area for refuse. Now, she was talking about the possibility if skips were required because of the nature of the industry that's actually in there, that they would have a temporary or a very quick fix of being able to just dump it and then load it and get rid of it. But without conditions, I can see that could be abused. The obvious place for someone to put it down would be in parking spaces, and a skip would take up 2 parking spaces. And the layouts that we've got would indicate that the adjoining unit would end up picking up the problem. Now, is it possible that we can put a condition on there that refuse collection items are only to be put in the refuse area unless a separate application is made to planning for that, to prevent these kind of problems where I can see the issue becoming a problem for the neighbour? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor FD.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry to harp on about this, but the charging points, any chance we could get charging points on as an informative? So 10% of parking, so for...
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. Another question for Katie. With Councillor Reid's questions relating to skips has raised something in my mind. I know in a number of industrial estates, they've the positioning of containers, like shipping containers, on site to allow additional storage it seems to be allowed on a number of industrial estates. Is there anything that would prevent the an occupier of one of the units from having a shipping container permanently placed outside their unit? Thank you.
Are there any more members with questions? Because we've explored this one quite a lot. So after these answers are passed over, we will move on with this application. Right, so there's no more members indicating. So Katie, would you like to bring together the answers, please?
Yes, thank you. So Councillor Mrs. Shaw raised the issue of the parking bays being 2.5 by 5, which is the minimum parking standard, which is correct. Those are the spaces have been designed to that minimum rather than the preferred. That size of space has been accepted elsewhere on this wider business park site, so it would be difficult for us to insist on the preferred bay size for this in this particular instance, and they meet a minimum standard, so they would be usable spaces, maybe not for huge vehicles, but for an average vehicle, and some vehicles are getting kind of smaller as well. A minimum parking base is acceptable here. In terms of the skips, what we do have is condition 4 on the application. So condition 4 requires that all of the parking bays be provided and retained in perpetuity. What we could do is just to dot the I's and cross the T's, is to make it clear that the service yard area, so allowing the access into those spaces, should also be kept clear, so that the service yard is just to be used for the manoeuvring of vehicles into and out of parking bays and into and out of the units. So that would mean that, you know, a skip couldn't or a container, which goes on to the next point, couldn't be sited kind of in a kind of permanent way to cause blockage of parking bays. Oh, and sorry, there was the last one. In terms of the electric vehicle charging points, we certainly can put that on as an informative. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Members, we've had a good and full discussion on that. Could I just ask Rebecca Hurst if you just would care to confirm my view that Councillor Stanley would be inappropriate him to vote at this point?
Apologies, Chair. I was trying to find my cursor. Yes, that is the case. Unfortunately, members do need to be present throughout the item being presented. I think if it had been fleeting, then maybe we could take a few, but I think 5 to 6 minutes, it's clear that through no fault of his own, Councillor Stanley wasn't present in the meeting for the presentation, and on that basis, cannot vote. Okay, then. Right, members, we're going to move on to the voting now. So,
Chairman, just briefly, just point of order. Katie raised a matter that, with regard to the not just the parking area, but the area in front of the parking, that the condition could be amended to make sure that this could not be used for other alternatives, so that it's kept clear. So does any of the conditions, Katie, need to be amended for you to meet your suggestion before we vote?
Yep, so I think I've already referred to condition 2 and 4 needing to be amended, just to make sure that the revised landscaping scheme is delivered, and that would deliver some tree planting and hedge planting within the kind of parking area of the site. In addition, I'm suggesting that we amend condition 4 also, which already requires that the parking is provided and maintained in perpetuity for use solely for parking of vehicles, but also to add to that condition to say that the service yard area should be used solely for the manoeuvrability of vehicles, either to access parking bays or to drop off, and access into the buildings themselves, and for no other purpose. So yes, that's what the recommendation includes now.
Right, so that's what we're voting on now. Yes.
Thank you. So we have reserved matters application. There are 7 condition points on pages 6.1 to 6.3. There are amendments as stated to conditions 2 and 4, and there were informatives offered with regard to tree species and electric car points. First of all, can you please raise your hand if you wish to have a recorded vote? I see no hands raised for a recorded vote. Right. Please raise your blue hand if you are in favour of the application. It's like bingo, this is. Okay. Please take your hands down. Councillor Hookway, the last, that's it. Please raise your hand if you are against. No indications. Please raise your hand if you are abstaining. Thank you. I don't think we need any numbers, but that item is clearly approved. Thank you. Item 7, land to the rear of 8 St John's Road, Great Wakering. This is the item that has a small addendum. Again, Katie is going to present to us on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so hopefully members can see a location plan on screen. This application is to a backland site accessed off St John's Road. Residential development borders the site to all sides. The proposal seeks to demolish the existing buildings that were previously in commercial use but have been vacant for some time. And the proposal seeks to construct 2 buildings, each containing 2 flats. So on screen now is a previously, just move that slightly. So this is a previously refused plan because there's quite a lot of planning history to this site. So this refused application was for 5 flats, each 1 bed, and converting the existing buildings. And members refused this scheme back in 2019. But the layout of the refused scheme is on screen now. The reasons for refusal related to a lack of visitor parking provision and insufficient amenity space to serve the flats. In the determination of the appeal, the inspector found that the lack of visitor parking was not objectionable here. He did, however, agree that a minimum 25 square metres of amenity space per flat should be provided. So what the applicant's done is they've gone away, and in light of that appeal decision, they've amended the proposal to the scheme that's before you tonight. So this now on screen is the proposed layout, and it's very similar to the previous one, but there are some differences. So the applicant has taken account of the inspector's reasoning and now has reduced the number of flats proposed. So whilst previously there were 5, there's now 4. So the 100 square metres of amenity space now meets the 25 square metre provision to serve the 4 flats. So that addresses the reason for refusal, or the reason for the inspectors dismissing of the appeal. 4 car parking spaces are now proposed. So 2 where my cursor is here in an undercroft. It's not a garage, it's open to the front. And so it's undercroft parking spaces here, and 2 undercroft parking spaces to this building where my cursor is here. So that parking provision would provide 1 space per flat, and all the flats proposed are 1 bed. There would still be a lack of visitor parking, and the 0.25 spaces per dwelling would equate to 1 space. So we're looking at a lack of 1 visitor's parking space on the site. But the lack of visitor parking provision was accepted previously on appeal by the inspector. And for that reason, it is considered that the 4 spaces now provided would be acceptable in relation to the development proposed. Just take you to the, so on screen now you should see the elevation plans for plot 1. So the scale, design and appearance of the building to plot 1 is the same as that previously considered in the previous application, although fenestration is slightly different and serving some different rooms. Several conditions are recommended, which would include requiring obscure glazing and fixing shut of windows to the side elevations. A slight amendment to the wording of condition 9 is recommended to include the requirement to obscure glaze and fix shut this south facing window here, as well as the one, let me just scroll down, to the northern side here. And take you to the proposed elevations to plot 2. So the change to the building to plot 2 essentially is relating largely to the ground floor, which is on the bottom of the screen here. And the living room has been extended because previously there were 3 parking spaces proposed along here, and now there's 2 in this part here. So it's considered, members, that the revised proposal has addressed the reason for the dismissal of the appeal of the previous scheme by providing policy compliant amenity space to serve the 4 flats proposed, and the recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to the stated conditions in the report and the slight amendment to condition 9 to require obscure glazing and fixing shut of the southern side elevation window to plot 1.
Thank you very much. Councillor McPherson, as a visiting member, I believe you wish to speak on this one.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to draw the committee to a couple of points. Page 7.6, 3.15. The inspector acknowledged the local residents had expressed concern that this would exacerbate existing on-street parking demands, but nevertheless considered that there would be existing on-street capacity to accommodate for the limited number of displaced vehicles associated with this proposal. The inspector accepted that the area is more heavily parked at the weekend, but still concluded that the surrounding streets would be capable of appropriately absorbing the limited additional parking demand created by this scheme. It was therefore concluded by the inspector that the appeal scheme would have been unlikely to significantly inconvenience existing residents through an increased income petition for on-street spaces or prejudice pedestrian or vehicular safety. Can I just say, I get so very disappointed when someone who has absolutely no local knowledge or has at least taken time to do research before giving complete disregard to our development committee. I would expect someone of such position to at least have done some research. If they had, they would not have assumed that there would be existing on-street capacity. Instead, they would have discovered that there is no capacity, that there is a daily issue with parking. So much so that most recently, the refuse collection days have had to be altered so that a smaller collection vehicle could be organised for these roads. So as I say, it's disappointing when the inspector makes these decisions with little knowledge. Can I also refer to 3.17 and 3.18, which refer again to parking? These spaces are in carports, which are, as the officer has explained, enclosed on 3 sides. So you will be driving in and reversing out of these. So I've asked questions whether they would actually be usable. Would drivers be able to vacate their cars once parked? It is intimated to me by officers that these are acceptable and that they are the same size as previously submitted. It would be good if this could be confirmed that they are as the previous plans, and the previous plans were also enclosed on 3 sides and exactly the same format. If offered, then perhaps the committee could ask this question. Also, just finally, the refuse area. Would there be any condition that these are taken to the perimeter on collection days and returned to the refuse area by the residents as soon as emptied, and not left on the footpath or blocking the entrance, which will cause more obstructions? Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Steptoe, as a visiting member, you've also indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to agree with most of what Councillor McPherson has said with regards to the parking. It is a daily issue down St John's Road, and for those that aren't familiar with St John's Road, part of it is actually an unmade road and not necessarily part of the adopted highway. The main issue I wanted to ask the committee to consider is the property which is number 8, which is to the east of the development, has an access through the new driveway to the rear of their property. Would that be maintained? that needs to be made sure that that still maintains that access that they already have at that point. With regards to the size of the parking bays, yes, again, it is becoming more and more difficult with the design and the shape of cars, that once you go into a parking space such as that, it is very difficult to access the vehicle. I certainly find it difficult, speaking personally. Perhaps it just needs thinner people, I don't know. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. That's both of our non-members that have indicated. We'll now move on to the members part of the discussion. Before we do that, members, I must remind you that we have recently seen an almost identical application here, which has gone to inspection. The two primary issues that we're focusing on here are the visitor parking and the amenity space. It would not be appropriate to be bringing up new issues that we have found acceptable in a recently considered application. And just say that at the outset. Councillor Stanley, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Katie, could you just bring up the overall picture of the whole unit, the whole site, please? Thank you. The amenity space that we're talking about, you say has been increased. Are you including the dotted line in that space, or is it from the, if you like, the other side of the parking one wall under parking, from that to the back? Is what's the boundary of the amenity space? And secondly, when it's going to look very good, but if you have driven into parking bay 1, how can you do a 3-point turn in that shared blocked paved drive area to drive out of the units? Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Parking is always an issue. It's one of the biggest issues throughout the country. And I agree with I'm not familiar with the area at all, but I agree with the sentiment of Councillor Macpherson and Councillor Steptoe. And really, we should be designing places that work for people, work for the residents. And it's a question really for Katie, that does the inspector's decision, their ruling, does that trump our published policies? Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. My issue is I've got a couple of questions if I can. It is about parking. Are the parking spaces shown that we're on the new plans the same sizes as the ones that were refused on the last application, please? And I've been reading on 3.5 that the inspector says it's a village area and there's plenty of transport, public transport. But I've just looked and the buses run every 1.5 hours. They start at 7 o'clock and finish at 6:45. So these people need, and I'm not digressing, Chair, it is because of the parking. The people who live here will need cars to be able to get to the station, because they will not be able to use public transport. If Katie could just answer the question about the parking spaces for me, please. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor FD.
Thank you, Chairman. I also agree with Councillor Steptoe, Councillor Macpherson and Councillor Shaw about the parking. Again, when Kate answers the question about the free size our cars will fit in there, how cars will manoeuvre will be interesting. I also had maybe a point with the trees that are overshadowing, if we can put maybe a condition or something so the trees don't go over 3 meters, maybe dwarf trees or Japanese maples or something like that, which would hopefully answer one of the letters against this. Yeah, just look to see Katie's answers to the questions. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. I want to express my agreement with pretty much everyone who's actually said about the parking issue. I know when we previously went as a committee to the site to look at it when it was the previous application, I had a problem parking down that road there, and I could see that there was an issue. It was obvious to anyone who went there, so I am really quite surprised at the comments from the inspector, and I do agree that there seems to be a lack of knowledge of the area there in his judgment. Now obviously we can't question his judgment, but I do actually think it's quite naive to think that this is not going to actually create a parking issue. The other thing is, was the bin store where it is now marked on the drawing there last time? Because if that wasn't there last time, then that is part of this application and we can comment on that. The reason being why I say that is there was an application that we had last year where position of bins on bin collection day was part of the issue. And if the bin men have to walk all the way down the drive there to actually get the bins from the bin store where it's marked, I would venture to suggest that isn't going to happen. So I would like to know if there is any arrangement within the application to have an area where the bins can be put outside without interfering, without access to adjoining properties. Thank you.
Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. As a ward councillor, I'm very familiar with this road, and I understand the concerns raised by other councillors in relation to issues to do with parking. I think the fact that there is no visitor parking means that any visitors are likely to try and attempt to park in the St John's Road, which is always full and very difficult to find spaces. So I do believe that we are meant to look at the application and within the red boundary lines, but the impact of this particular application is probably going to be felt mostly outside of those red boundary lines. I do have concerns about the layout of the parking within the plan and the ability of vehicles to be able to manoeuvre into those parking spaces. And so, you know, our vehicle is going to have enough space to be able to come into the area in using forward gears and be able to move around so they can access the area and then exit using forward gears and not have to reverse down the access road. I'm not sure that that's been explained sufficiently, if there's sufficient room for vehicles to be able to manoeuvre so that they can then go out of the access road facing forwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mr Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the refuse bins. The Principal Street Scene Officer has commented that the flats will require communal bins and there should be suitable storage allowing collection from the curbside. Who's going to be responsible for putting these? Are obviously going to be larger bins. Who's going to be responsible for putting these out on the curbside and withdrawing them at the end after they've been collected?
Thank you. We've had 7 members make a variety of points. I'll come to Katie, please, to answer the questions.
Thank you. So, in order, the amenity space. So it hasn't been increased, but what has happened is the number of flats that the area served has been reduced. So it's 100 square meters and it's taken from, if you can see my cursor, so this point here excluding this area here, because this is part of the kind of shared block paved driveway area. So it excludes that and then curls round here and includes the patios to the front. So it's essentially all of this area where it's labelled communal garden area, and it excludes all of this shared block paved drive area, and it excluding this kind of little turning head part of that shared drive. In terms of vehicles turn within the site, the arrangement of parking spaces is the same as that was proposed previously, with the only change being that previously there was an additional space here, you can see where my cursor is, next to parking bay 4 on the plan on screen, and that has now been omitted. Then we had a question about from Councillor Wilson about the weight we'd give to the inspector's decision. So it certainly is a material consideration that has to be taken into account in the determination of this application. It is relevant, and in the determination of the previous appeal, the inspector had all of the neighbour objections that were received in relation to that application, and any representations that were received in relation to the appeal. They also had the council's appeal statement, which set out in more detail members' concerns about parking in the locality. It included photographs of evidence of parking stress on St John's Road. The appeal statement from the council also referenced a fairly recent appeal in Hockley, where the inspector there actually agreed with members about the impact on existing residents as a result of increased competition from on-street parking. So that was referenced in the appeal, and notwithstanding all of that information, the inspector still concluded in the way they did in relation to the previous application on this site. And the previous application was insufficient, if you like, in terms of our parking standard by 2 visitor spaces, whereas this application now is insufficient in relation to our standard by 1 visitor space, because they've reduced the number of flats to 4. So it is a material consideration. That's why the recommendation is as it is in respect of that issue. In terms of whether the parking sizes are the same as previously, yes, they are. So there were 2 spaces here. These are 2.6 metres wide, so they would accommodate a car and allow somebody to access, get into and out of that vehicle. And in relation to the bin store area here, this was the same area that was proposed previously. So no issue was taken in respect of the location of this bin storage area in relation to the previous application. So it would be unreasonable, I would suggest, for us to raise this as a concern now. It would be for either the residents, if the refuse collectors aren't willing to go up the driveway to collect from here, to position the bin for collection and then take it back following it having been emptied. And I think that was all the questions.
Yeah. Thank you. Members, whether you agree or not, I don't think we need to remake any points again, but Councillor Stanley, you have indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to point out that is Katie indicating that the patio areas can be used by all residents, no matter where they are in that enclosure? They can use either patio as they so wish. The patios are not relevant for that particular flat or that particular property. And also, I didn't get an answer as to how one drives into plot 1 car park and how one reverses and does a 3-point turn in that small area. And the fact of trying to drive in on plot 2 to drive forward as you are driving forward, or would you would then have to drive reverse but drive out, but then you'll be reversing the car all the way down to the front to St John's Close or Road. Thank you.
The point's made.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Shaw, final one.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This Katie, you're saying, and we can't really go with the bins. Are they? They're not the normal size bins, are they? They're going to be bigger bins. So, and they're going to be a lot heavier for residents to actually pull out to St John's Road. If the bins can't, if the bin men can't get into this development, is that what we're saying? I just want to clarify on it. Are the bins in the bin store going to be what we have in our normal houses, or are they going to be a bigger size bin, please?
Go on then.
Yep. So I haven't got details specifically of what bins would be provided, but in flatted schemes can often have communal bins, which are larger than the bins that would be provided to an individual dwelling. But in terms of this storage area and the provision of larger bins, the scheme is the same as was previously proposed. So we didn't have a reason for refusal on the last scheme around this issue of the bin storage area. So this area can accommodate refuse bins for the 4 one-bed flats, be it large bins or the standard bins, and that would be a decision for the kind of waste team, I think, to make on this application.
Thank you. So members, I must remind you again, this application has been considered by us previously. All of the things were found acceptable, not all liked, but found acceptable with the exception of visitor parking and amenity space. An independent inspector has reconsidered all of the evidence that we considered. They've found that they don't have an issue with the visitor parking on the road, whether we like it or not. It's not considered an issue by the inspector after reconsidering all the evidence that we've considered. The amenity space is the same as was indicated before, but instead of being shared between 5 people, it's now shared between 4, and it now meets the standard. There's clearly been indication that there are a number of other things that people don't like, but we have to remember we're determining a planning application on planning matters, and those planning matters have been visited by us and determined on. They've been visited by an inspector and determined on, and they are exceptionally relevant and material to the way in which we choose to make this decision. So I'd just like to double check that all members have heard. Councillor Stanley, you've been fully with us this time around. No other members have indicated that they've had a problem or not been able to hear the information. The report is for recommendation for approval. It's on 12 points across pages 7.1 to 7.3, with condition 9 regarding glazing being amended. So members, can I ask you please to raise, Katie, could you take off the share please, just so that it's clear, we've got absolute clarity for voting purposes. Thank you. Could I ask you to raise your blue hand if you wish to have a recorded vote? That passes. For audit purposes, I believe we need to count those. I've got 4, which passes the threshold. Okay, hands down, please. So there won't be a recorded vote. Hands down, please. Right, okay. All hands are down. Please raise your hand if you are in favour of this application. Four. Hands down, please. All hands are down. Please raise your hand if you are against this application. I have 7 there. Please drop your hands. Please raise your hand if you wish to abstain. We have the 1. So that item is refused or not approved. So can I just take a little bit of clarity here from the way this voting system has worked? The voting has not allowed us to approve, but effectively we've refused without reasons for the refusal. Do we now need to move to reasons for refusal? The voting has not approved it. I'll just take a bit of advice there, please. So what we now need is a substantive motion from someone with regard to the refusal, as this item has not been approved. Councillor Hookway.
I would state that the reason for refusal is that the application doesn't meet our council's policy in relation to visitor parking.
Councillor FD.
And also parking bay sizes.
Could I just ask Katie to just pass comment on the items that have been suggested, particularly the parking bay size, which would be a new addition? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I think the difficulty members may have is that the first reason for refusal suggested by Councillor Hookway, in terms of the application not providing visitor parking in accordance with the council's parking standard, was essentially word for word the reason for refusal on the previous application, and an inspector has disagreed on that point and taken a view that a parking provision of 5 spaces to serve 5 flats would be acceptable on the previous scheme, and actually in this scheme we're getting 4 spaces to serve 4 flats, and the visitor parking requirement has gone down, if you like, in terms of the requirement. So it has already been examined on appeal. And I think there is a potential risk of costs being awarded against us in terms of putting the same reason forward that's been already, considered. In relation to the parking bay sizes, that introduces another, it introduces a reason for refusal that wasn't identified in relation to the last scheme. So again, my advice would be the same. Probably even more, I'd advise even more caution against introducing a reason for refusal that didn't even feature previously. The parking bay sizes are no different in terms of size on this application.
Thank you. Mr. Houghton, you'd like to come in at this point as well.
Sorry, I think you just asked a question to Katie that I was going to ask. Just my concerns around the validity of the reasons for refusal. It feels slightly like Groundhog Day. So an inspector, I take it, will view it in that way. Thank you.
Councillor Hookway, you're the one that proposed this. You've heard that your specific reason was tested on inspection and failed that test.
Well, I take the view that basically the previous application provided 0 visitor parking. This application provides 0 visitor parking. It doesn't. It doesn't meet our policy. So the other thing is that another inspector may take a different view. I'm prepared to, because of the issues, I'm prepared that to let another inspector take a second view on this matter. We ask medical people to get second opinions. We might as well have a second opinion in relation to this.
Can I ask if there is another member that is happy to second the direction in which you're travelling? Councillor Stanley, your hand was up. Was that to second?
Yes, that was the second, and the fact that not only is it inadequate, it doesn't give reality on how you would manoeuvre around that area. So it is to do with parking, most understandably. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Hookway, you're putting forward the reason for refusal of the lack of visitor parking. Another member mentioned the parking bay size, and you heard the officer's comment there. Could you just confirm whether you're? I'm not. Okay.
I don't think it's appropriate for that to be added. I'm only prepared to put forward in my proposal the first item.
Right. So, members, I believe this is a crass mistake, and in all the planning training that I've ever experienced, and it's quite a bit over the years, I'll wholeheartedly agree with officers to have a planning inspector decision that is so very, very recent to be ignored like this is a huge error that we are making. And I'll go to the assistant director, who will also give you another bit of formal opinion on this before we make a determination, because you have to be absolutely aware about the decision you're potentially going to vote on. Thank you.
I mean, the only alternative is to first seeking a sort of an independent legal view on this aspect, just so that we can present that to a further committee before you consider the actual outcome. Because, as you say, that it is unusual to go against inspector's ruling, for a committee to go against inspector's ruling, and it's also then puts us in a position where it's actually quite hard to defend for officers from a professional point of view, because the professional has already ruled that this is an acceptable application. And so in terms of legality, I think that there are concerns that perhaps beyond my understanding, that I wonder if it's worth seeking a further view on before we actually make a decision. That's all I could say, is perhaps ask the committee to consider deferring, if they did mind to refuse. Thank you.
At the moment, we have a motion put forward by Councillor Hookway, which has been properly seconded. I don't want to open the debate up much further, but a number of people are indicating. Can you keep your comments, please, concise, please? Councillor Weston.
Just a quick question, Chairman. Am I allowed to ask what sort of figure we're looking at if this goes further?
That's not relevant.
Okay, that's right.
I don't
Thank
believe. You. And we need to determine this on planning matters, not what a potential cost may or may not be. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, it's about democracy and who rules. We've got published policies, and we're actually being overruled by the inspector. So I just think our policies should prevail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. A decision has been made by the Development Committee, and this decision should stand as it is. It's been seconded, it's been put to you, and
The
it should
decision's not
stand
been
as
made
it
yet
is.
on the refusal.
There is no reason whatsoever that one can take the view second time around as to say that the first view was wrong. So that's where it stands.
Okay. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to say that should Councillor Hookway's recommendation fail, I would happily recommend deferment on this for further info. Thank you.
Councillor Hookway, anything final to say before we vote?
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. No, I think Councillor Wilson and Councillor Stanley have put the point fairly clear, so I'm happy to stand behind their words. Thank you.
It's clear where we are. You're not going to add anything new, Councillor, Mrs. Shaw?
No, sorry, my hand got taken down. I don't know why, while you were talking. I would go with the Assistant Director and say, can we please defer this to take further legal advice?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're at the position where we are with a motion to be determined now. So we have a motion from Councillor Hookway to refuse this item based on the lack of visitor parking. All members have clearly heard the advice and the debate.
Excuse me, could I just ask that it be included that in the wording that it is against our stated and written policy?
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm happy for that to be added to the.
Yes. Those members wishing to have a recorded vote, please raise your hand. I'm counting that as 3. 4, sorry. 4.
5.
Okay, 4. Please drop your hands. Thank you. Hands cleared. Those in favour of supporting Councillor Hookway's reason for refusal, please raise your hand. I'm counting 5 there. Thank you. If you could drop the hands. Thank you. Hands clear. Those members who are against supporting Councillor Hookway's reason for refusal. One, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Chairman, my hand won't go up.
Okay,
Can I?
I think that is a fair indication, a fair positive indication. Councillor Merrick, 1 + 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, making 6 in total. Thank you. Please drop the hands. Thank you. Those members that wish to abstain. None. Right. That item for refusal is not supported. We're therefore in the no man's land. And I go straight to Councillor Williams.
I'd like to repeat my proposal that we defer this application for further further information on the matter, please.
Okay. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
I would like to second Councillor Williams' proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion now put forward for a further deferment, which is appropriately seconded. I think we've had more than enough debate and all fully understand the various aspects of this discussion to go straight to a vote. So we'll go through the same procedure again. Those members in favour of a recorded vote, please raise your hand. One, two, three. That reaches the threshold again. Okay, please drop the hands. Those members in favour of supporting the deferment of this item pending further legal discussion, please raise. I'm counting 8. I'm now at 9. Please. Just looking for Sonia to nod her head that she's got the name. 9. Please drop the hands.
I'm not quite clear what are we voting for or against, or what is it? I'm confused now.
Well, we've just done that element. Please drop the hands, please. We just need to finish off. Need everybody to drop their hands. All hands are dropped. Those people, those members that are not in favour of supporting the deferment, please raise your hand now. We appear to have had an inappropriate double vote there. Councillor Stanley, your hand was up for and both to defer and to not defer.
Chairman, I got confused there when you said in the last vote whether it was for or against.
Right, members, just hold on. For clarity, I need to rerun this vote. I can't take any chances with democracy not being clearly demonstrated. We'll move again to vote on Councillor Wilson's proposal to defer this item pending further legal discussion, which was seconded by Councillor Shaw.
Sorry, Chairman, it was Councillor Williams.
Councillor Williams, sorry. Gosh. Sorry for that. Right.
It's all right.
Those members in favour of a recorded vote, please raise your hand. I have 3 hands. The threshold is passed. Please drop your hands. All hands down. Please raise your hand if you are in favour of supporting the deferment pending further legal discussion as put forward by Councillor Williams. One, two, three, 7. That's 7. Okay, please drop your hands. Oh. All hands are dropped. No. Councillor Merrick. All hands are down. Those members who are not in favour of supporting the motion for further for deferment, please raise your hand. That's 4. Please drop your hands. All hands dropped. Those members in favour who wish to abstain, please raise your hand. There are no hands raised. Therefore, that item shall be further deferred as per the motion. I believe that now concludes our meeting at 8:55.
Chairman, can I ask a question just before you go?
You can, but I'm going to finish the meeting though, and we'll stop the live stream. Then I'll take the question.
Yeah, I need legal advice.
Well,
you seem to be the person.
Is this within the meeting or without the meeting?
Yes, it is. Yes,
do you
it
believe
is.
there has been some misconduct within the meeting, Councillor Stanley?
Well, I believe there is. Yes.
Councillor
Would you
Stanley,
like me
would
to
you like to make
explain?
a point then, please?
Right. Thank you. This committee, development committee, is supposed to decide articles on the development of developments. Are we now proposing that all developments will now go to legal to make sure that we are legally now entitled to make decisions on the development committee?
Can I stop you there, please, Councillor Stanley?
Because I need to know. Let me speak, because you've had plenty of say, so I need something to say now.
Could we do a mute, please, Sonia? Thank you. Members, we've conducted the business of the meeting. Any further business is clearly for outside of this venue. So I shall close the meeting now at 8:57. Thank you.
Chairman, good evening.